The German shepherd lay sprawled on the frozen earth, its chest heaving in shallow, ragged breaths. The cabin behind it stood dark and silent, its windows black voids that promised nothing but secrets. Rain drummed a relentless rhythm on the tin roof, carrying a scent of wet pine and something fouler, almost metallic. Whoever had been inside, the dog had clearly tried to warn the world, and now it was exhausted, collapsing in despair. Somewhere deep in the woods, a man watched in the shadows, lips curling into a smile that promised danger, and the night seemed to lean closer, listening. The gravel crunched under his boots as Ethan stepped off the narrow logging road and onto the muddy trail that led to the cabin. His flashlight cut a thin, trembling beam through the mist, illuminating trees that stood like silent sentinels. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed, and the sound reverberated off the hills, sharp and hollow. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the scent of wet earth and pine needles thick in the air. He paused, ear straining. That wasn't just the wind. Something low and guttural whispered from behind the dark line of trees, a groan or perhaps a whimper. The German shepherd lay in the mud, a heap of trembling fur and exhaustion. Ethan's chest tightened as he knelt beside the animal, noticing the ragged breath and the way its body twitched as if each heartbeat hurt. There was no collar, no identification, nothing to hint at who had brought it here, or why. The dog's eyes were sharp and intelligent, and filled with a quiet panic that gnawed at him. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of what was inside the cabin. He reached out, voice low and soothing. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog's gaze never wavered from the cabin door, ears pinned back. A shiver ran through Ethan. That gaze wasn't just warning, it was pleading. The cabin itself was a relic of another age, darkened with rot, the roof sagging slightly under the weight of years, its windows smeared with grime. Smoke stains marked the chimney, though no fire burned. The front door had been hastily barred from the inside, slats with jutting out like teeth. There was a strange stillness around it, as if the air itself had learned to hold its breath. Ethan stood, brushing mud from his jacket, eyes scanning the tree lean. He'd been in these woods plenty of times before, tracking illegal logging operations, surveying remote properties, but he had never felt a sense of pure dread like this. There was something inside that cabin, and the dog knew it. "Come on," he murmured, nudging the dog gently. "We need to get you inside somewhere safe." The dog didn't move at first. Its body sagged further into the mud. Then, almost reluctantly, it rose and followed him down the path toward his truck. Each step was measured, cautious, as if it expected the world to leap out and punish it at any moment. By the time Ethan got the dog into the back of the truck, night had fallen completely. The forest swallowed the remaining light, leaving only the beam of the headlights cutting through the black. He drove slowly, glancing at the dog, whose eyes seemed fixed on the dark road ahead. It was clear, whatever it had seen inside that cabin, it wasn't just danger. It was something horrific. At the edge of town, Ethan called Dr. Mar Whitman, the local veterinarian. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy but steady. "Ethan, it's late. What's wrong?" "I found a dog in the woods near the old Caraway cabin. He's messed up. You need to see him." "Bring him in. I'll stay awake." "Something's off about your tone. Is he hurt bad?" "I don't know yet, but I've got a feeling about that cabin, too." When they arrived, Mara's clinic smelled of antiseptic and warmth, a stark contrast to the chill and damp Ethan had left behind. The dog leapt out of the truck on wobbly legs, immediately pressing against Mara, whimpering. She knelt and inspected the dog quickly. Thin, dehydrated, minor abrasions on the legs and chest, but nothing that explained the fear in its eyes. "This isn't just hunger or cold," Mara murmured, her brow furrowed. "He's terrified of something." Ethan nodded. He hadn't said anything, but the dog's gaze lingered toward the windows, as if it could still see the cabin's shadow looming in the distance. Mara handed him a cup of tea. "You look like hell," she said softly. "Tell me what happened." And he did. He told her about the cabin, the way the dog had collapsed outside, the feeling that someone, was inside waiting. Mara listened quietly, her eyes darkening with concern. "Ethan," she said finally, "there's a reason the town doesn't go near that cabin. I never thought I'd see anyone brave or stupid enough to check it out. He gave her a tight smile. I don't do brave. I do curious. Sometimes curiosity's a dangerous habit. Mara shook her head. Dangerous doesn't even begin to cover it. The Caraway cabin, it's been abandoned for years. But every so often, people disappear, things get stolen. Folks say it's haunted, cursed, whatever. But I've always thought some things don't need ghosts. They just need someone twisted enough to lock them inside. The words hung between them. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the clinic's cold tiles. Outside, the dog lay on a blanket Mara had laid out, ears twitching at every creak of the building, every faint rustle from the street. Ethan couldn't help but watch it. Something about its alertness, its silent communication, unnerved him. I need to know what's inside that cabin, he admitted finally. I can't explain it, but the dog, it's warning us. I can feel it. Mara looked at him sharply, the weight of her words heavy. If you go back there, Ethan, you need to understand you might not come back. Not just physically. People have vanished in those woods before, quietly. No one even knew what to look for. He sipped the tea, staring into the amber liquid. I know, but I also know that if that dog had just run away, I'd never forgive myself. Mara's expression softened, but a tension lingered in her eyes. You got a stubborn streak. Just don't get too stubborn out there. Promise me you'll take someone with you. Ethan didn't respond. He already knew he'd have to. There was something about the cabin that demanded more than just one witness. The air outside seemed to pulse, thick and oppressive, even from the relative safety of the clinic. By the time he left, the dog was resting quietly, but its eyes still scanned the room, ears twitching at shadows. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over, that whatever had collapsed the dog outside that cabin was still waiting, patient, silent, and watching. As he drove back toward the woods, headlights slicing through the fog, he thought of the old man who had once lived in the cabin decades ago. No one had seen him leave, and no one had ever seen inside of the place after the authorities finally entered. The stories were vague, unsettling. Some spoke of screams, others of strange lights, whispers in the forest. Most of the town dismissed them, but Ethan had learned over the years that the truth rarely wore a friendly face. And in the darkness, the German shepherd in the back of the truck shivered once more, as if warning him. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Ethan parked the truck at the edge of the forest, headlights sweeping across the muddy trail, and the silhouette of the cabin beyond. The dog, now alert and restless, leapt from the bed and padded ahead, sniffing the damp earth with purpose. Every instinct in Ethan screamed caution, but curiosity, that dangerous thread, pulled him forward. He glanced at the dog's rigid posture, its ears pricked, body trembling. Not from cold, but from something deeper, something it knew and wanted him to understand. The door to the cabin had rotted in places, the lock hanging loosely on one hinge. Ethan hesitated, hand on the worn handle. The smell of mildew and decay seeping out like a living thing. The dog whined low, brushing against his leg, then darted inside before he could stop it. The interior was dark, thick with dust, and shadows clung to corners like cobwebs. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, falling on splintered floorboards and overturned furniture. The air smelled metallic, blood, rust, and old secrets. The dog's low growl cut through the silence. Ethan froze. Somewhere deep in the cabin, a faint scratching sound echoed, soft and deliberate. Hello. His voice was cautious, almost apologetic, as if the building might answer back. Silence. Only the dog's growl persisted, rising in intensity. He followed the animal into what used to be the living room. The floorboards creaked under his weight, each sound amplified in the oppressive quiet. Then he saw it, a trapdoor slightly ajar, leading down into the basement. The dog had stationed itself by the opening, teeth bared, a silent guardian. Ethan knelt, feeling the chill emanating from below. Something horrible had been kept there, something that the dog had tried to protect the world from. He glanced around, heart pounding. On the walls, faint scrawls in charcoal marred the faded wallpaper. Words like, "Don't let them take her," and "They're coming," scratched in desperate handwriting. The air grew colder as he realized the cabin had been more than a residence. It had been a prison. Ethan took a deep breath. All right, let's see what's down there. The basement stairs groaned as he descended. The flashlight cut a thin path through the darkness. The dog stayed close, hackles raised, eyes darting to every shadow. At the bottom, the beam landed on a metal door, rusted shut but not locked. Something about it made Ethan's stomach twist. This was no ordinary storage room. He pushed it open. The smell hit him first, coppery, pungent, unmistakable. Then he saw her, a girl, maybe 14, huddled against the wall, trembling. Her hair was matted, clothes soaked and torn, eyes wide with terror. The dog barked, a sharp, urgent sound, and she flinched, shielding herself with her arms. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you, Ethan said softly, kneeling at a distance. His voice shook more than he wanted. She didn't respond, only watched him warily, as if every human was a potential threat. The dog nudged her gently, tail low but wagging slightly, a bridge of trust and silence. She flinched, then slowly, hesitantly, allowed it to sniff her hand. A tiny tremor of relief passed through her. Ethan exhaled. They weren't alone, but at least one ally had been sent ahead. Can you tell me your name? Ethan asked. The girl's lips barely moved. Lila. Lila, it's okay. You're safe now. But the sense of safety was fragile. The basement was a cage, a reminder that someone or some group had wanted her hidden, silenced. The scrawled messages on the walls, the locked doors, the filth, they weren't accidents. They were warnings. As Ethan examined the basement further, he found remnants of restraint, frayed rope, a broken chain, a makeshift bed of tattered blankets. Something in the room stank of fear and desperation, layered with the residual scent of human presence that had turned sinister over time. The metal door led further back, into what appeared to be a storage room, but even from a distance, he could see shapes under tarps. He lifted one. A stack of old, dust-covered files spilled onto the floor. Names, addresses, and dates, some crossed out, some annotated in frantic, looping handwriting. The pattern was clear. These weren't just random victims. Someone had been tracking, monitoring, controlling lives. Lila wasn't an accident. She was part of a system. Who did this to you? Ethan whispered. She shook her head, tears running down her face. Not them. Please don't let them know. Ethan's pulse spiked. Whoever they were still out there, and if they realized Lila had been found, a sudden sound upstairs froze him. Footsteps, deliberate, heavy. Not one person. Multiple. Someone had followed him here. Panic surged, but he forced himself to think, every muscle tensed. The dog growled, low and warning. Ethan grabbed Lila's hand. We're leaving. Now. They moved quietly, retracing the steps, but as they reached the top, shadows moved across the moonlight spilling through the windows. Figures emerged, obscured by the mist outside, carrying the heavy air of menace. One stepped forward, tall, lean, with a crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. Morally gray, but unmistakably dangerous. You found her, the man said, voice smooth, deceptively calm. I'd hoped no one would. Ethan stepped in front of Lila. She's coming with us. The man laughed, a sound that cut through the night like glass. You don't understand. You shouldn't even be here. This isn't a game, and she isn't what you think she is. Ethan's grip on Lila tightened. Try me. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Ethan. That dog, it's smart. Too smart. But loyalty only goes so far. Suddenly, the rest of the figures emerged from the shadows, blocking the exits. The cabin's oppressive darkness now felt alive, closing in. The dog barked furiously, lunging at the nearest figure, but there were too many. Ethan realized that Lila's terror had been only part of the story. Someone had orchestrated this meticulously, tracking, waiting, ensuring the girl remained trapped. He needed a plan fast. His mind raced through possibilities, but the tight space, the confined forest, and the figures outside made improvisation the only option. Then, without warning, the dog darted toward a back window, claws scraping against wood. Ethan followed instinctively. Lila clung to him, sobbing. They managed to squeeze through, landing in the thick mud outside, rain washing away some of the fear, but none of the urgency. The figures shouted, but hesitation gave them a head start. The dog ran ahead, leading them down the narrow, winding path into the deeper forest. Heart hammering, Ethan stole glances at Lila. She was shaking, but alive, still holding on to a fragile thread of hope. The forest closed around them, the rain blurring shapes and sound, providing cover but also disorienting. Every snap of a twig, every distant howl, sent shivers down his spine. When they finally reached a clearing near the logging road, Ethan stopped, letting them catch their breath. The dog pressed against Lila, and she leaned into it, sobbing quietly. He looked around, heart racing, mind spinning with what they had discovered. Whoever had trapped Lila inside the cabin had planned this for a long time, and they were still out there, somewhere, watching. Ethan knew one thing with terrifying clarity. This was far from over. The cabin, the files, the network of threats, they were only the surface. And the German shepherd had been their only warning, their only guide through the darkness. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the forest slick and glistening under the weak light of dawn. Ethan, Lila, and the dog crouched behind a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, listening. Silence stretched around them, but Ethan knew better than to trust it. Somewhere out there, the figures from the cabin were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The files had revealed a network, a web of control, manipulation, and cruelty. Lila had been only one of many, but unlike the others, she had survived. For now, the dog growled low, ears flat against its skull, sensing movement Ethan couldn't yet see. "Stay close," he whispered to Lila. She nodded silently, still trembling but gripping his hand with strength born from terror and instinct. They moved cautiously toward the logging road, using the trees and undergrowth as cover. Ethan's mind raced with the questions that had been building since the first moment he saw the basement. Who were these people? Why Lila? And why the dog? Why had it been so desperate to protect her? As they reached the edge of the road, headlights cut through the mist. Ethan froze, instinct screaming. The figures had followed them, somehow tracking their escape through the woods. One of them stepped into the dim light. A woman this time, hair plastered to her face in the rain, eyes sharp and calculating. "You can't run," she said. Her tone was clinical, almost bored. "Do you have any idea what you stumbled into?" Ethan moved slightly in front of Lila, fists clenched. "I know enough to stop you." She smiled, cold and without warmth. "Stop us? You have no idea how deep this goes. Lila isn't just a victim. She's the key. The information she carries, it's worth more than you'll ever understand." Lila's brow furrowed. "Key for what?" Ethan's heart sank. The files, they had hinted at something more than just hiding children. There were coded notes, numbers, references to transactions. Someone had been using the kids to manipulate the town, maybe even the region. Lila had been trapped not merely as punishment or cruelty, but as leverage. The dog barked sharply, snapping Ethan's attention to the shadows. One of the figures, the tall man with the crooked smile from the cabin, was moving along the tree line, circling them. Ethan gritted his teeth. If they wanted Lila, they were going to have to take her from him first. Then something unexpected happened. The dog charged, teeth bared, a living spear of determination. The man didn't dodge fast enough, and the dog lashed onto his arm, forcing him back into the shadows. Ethan seized a moment, grabbing Lila and running toward the nearest ridge. The woman screamed orders, but the forest swallowed her voice. They ran without stopping, rain-slick mud tearing at their boots, branches slapping their faces, hearts pounding as adrenaline consumed every thought. Ethan didn't look back, but he felt the dog beside him, a constant, tireless presence. Somewhere ahead, a hollowed-out logging truck sat abandoned. They ducked inside, gasping for breath, and for the first time since the basement, Ethan allowed himself to glance at Lila. She was pale, shaken, but alive. Her eyes were wide, trying to process everything, and yet there was something in her gaze, a spark of defiance, of life refusing to be broken. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're going to get you safe," he said. The dog padded beside them, nose twitching, ears scanning. It had done its job, but Ethan knew the network was still out there. Lila's knowledge made her a target, and the files in that basement were proof enough that whoever they were, they wouldn't give up easily. Hours later, after hiding and moving to the forest, they finally reached the safe house Ethan had arranged, an old hunting cabin owned by a friend he could trust. Mara was already there, waiting, her expression taut with worry. "You made it," she breathed, rushing to Lila's side. The dog leapt into her arms, and for a moment there was a fragile calm. Ethan handed over files he had managed to salvage. Mara's hands trembled as she flipped through them. This is worse than I imagined," she murmured. They weren't just hiding her. They were orchestrating disappearances, controlling information, even blackmailing townsfolk. And Lila, she's the only one who can expose them. Lila shook her head. "I don't want to be a key. I just want to be normal." Ethan crouched beside her, looking into her eyes. "I know, but you've already survived. You've already fought. That makes you stronger than they ever counted on." The moral complexity of the situation weighed heavily on him. The dog had guided them, but it had been more than instinct. It had known, somehow, the human darkness they faced. The network was ruthless, calculating, and yet fragile. All it took was exposure, courage, and the right witnesses. As the first light of dawn crept to the cabin windows, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The town, the network, the people behind it, they were all part of a machine, but machines could be broken. Lila had the power to dismantle it, and he had the responsibility to protect her until she was ready. Later, as the day warmed and the shadows retreated, Ethan stepped outside with the dog. The creature stood tall now, proud, its eyes calm but watchful. It had done its part. "You saved her," Ethan whispered. The dog tilted its head, as if acknowledging the truth without words. There was no dramatic applause, no grand triumph, only the quiet weight of survival, of justice beginning to take root. And in that quiet, Ethan understood something fundamental. Courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just a willingness to step into the darkness, to face what others feared, and to bring someone back into the light. Mara joined them, glancing at the dog, then at Ethan. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. Ethan shook his head, eyes on the distant hills. "No, but it's a start. That's enough for today." Lila, watching from the doorway, smiled faintly for the first time. It was tentative, fragile, but it carried a weight of truth. She was free, at least for now. And sometimes that was enough. The German shepherd nuzzled her hand, a quiet guardian, a witness to their ordeal. Outside, the forest was waking, birds calling, wind rustling through the trees, indifferent to the horrors that had hidden beneath its canopy. But inside that small cabin, among the survivors and the vigilant dog, there was hope, a fragile, stubborn, human hope that maybe, just maybe, some darkness could be chased away by light, and trust to be rebuilt one small step at a time. And as Ethan looked at Lila, at Mara, at the dog, he understood the final truth. Heroism wasn't about defeating monsters. It was about protecting the innocent, listening to warnings, and choosing to stand in the shadows so others could see the dawn.